This is the Bizgnus Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted people and businesses in many tragic ways. Some companies have failed or are on the verge of shutting their doors permanently, and the human suffering is just numbing. But some seem to be doing okay. So what accounts for that? Anne Boudreau interviewed 40 survivors of traumas to understand how self-worth helps people survive and sometimes thrive. She says a major reason is the brain's ability to develop new pathways, something called neuroplasticity. Anne Boudreau talks about moving beyond trauma and finding new ways to improve attitude, energy, focus, resilience, and ability to heal in this Bizgnus podcast. And we always like to start out by telling our audience a little bit about the person we have as a guest, and we always let the guest do that. So if you wouldn't mind, go right ahead. Tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you, Doug. I'm thrilled to be here. I am a fairly new author. I grew up in the business world, so to speak, in terms of my career as a marketing and communications director, and came to Atlanta for a position and kept growing with each company that I moved on towards, and really highlighted my expertise in communications and marketing and honed in on those disciplines and worked for global companies. But around 2009, 2010, I started to look inwardly and realize that I truly wasn't fulfilled by what I was doing, even though I had kind of brainwashed my brain to believe that I was fulfilled. But I found that there was always something missing at the end of the day. I had a large salary and I was doing good work, had great colleagues. But at that point, I finally one day got to the point where I said, no, it's time to do something meaningful. And I think that's the goal of most of us in life, is we want to feel that what we do, no matter what it is, provides meaning not only to us, but to others. And so I left to write a book, and that's how I came upon the process. And I had no idea what I was doing, so it was all new to me. I'd studied writers, a big student of writers, but it was something that was much more challenging than I anticipated, to say the least.
Well, tell us about the book, and it start with the title, because it doesn't exactly give away what the book is about.
Yes, I know that. I've been told that, and upon reflection, I may have chosen a different one, although I still am crazy about the title. But most people think, what is a human mosaic? They have no idea. So they don't realize it's a self-help, self-improvement book. But I chose the title because in our lives, we are always evolving, and our energy is changing as we meet new people, as we grow, as we change and twist and turn through our lives. The energy about us are changing. And at the end of the day, or towards the end of our lives, we hope that we become a fully formed human mosaic. Our parts might be changing in different colors, different shapes, different sizes, but we are this compilation of beautiful elements that we have learned from, grown from, and created ourselves to become this beautiful mosaic. And so I feel that as people learn about themselves and learn about who they really are, they are becoming, more and more of themselves, and more learning to be the best version of themselves. So that's why I chose that title.
And how does this book help us improve ourselves?
That's a great question. I'm a student of Carl Rogers, and I read his book on becoming a person. And I realized long ago that although we have many, 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 many factors that we can turn towards, many resources that we can turn towards for help, for personal, psychological, emotional, mental help, that at the end of the day, we have to be the ones to heal ourselves. Someone can guide us, someone can tell us and feed us information, but when we go to bed at night and we arise in the morning, it is truly ultimately up to us to heal ourselves and to develop a self-belief, self-value in ourselves. No one can do it for us, and nothing in the outside world will ever fill that void of low self-worth. No achievements, no wealth, no relationship. It's really something that you as a person must dive into and explore.
How has what you learned to put into the book affected your life?
Oh, it's it's life transformative. It's changed my life. Although it's based on my own journey, and I think it had to be, really, because I'm not a psychologist or psychotherapist. Although I interviewed numerous psychotherapists, nuclear scientists, plastic surgeons, you name it. I interviewed just about everybody who could inculcate me a little bit more on what self-worth is, and how do we become someone who can gain self-understanding, self-acceptance, self-respect. And so I started, when I went through a terrible depression, my father had died unexpectedly, I plummeted. The foundation that I had throughout my life was my father. He was the person that loved me, I thought, unconditionally, that no one would ever love me the way he did. And when he died, that foundation that I had kind of relied on my whole life was shattered. And so it promulgated me into this deep, dark cavern where I was alone, and I knew that I was alone, and I didn't know what to do, where to go, so all my emotions were fractured, and I had no self-identity. It was quite traumatic. And so after a long grieving process, I started to research how to heal myself. I'd seen therapists, and it just didn't work for me because I had such a strong psychological background that I almost knew what they were going to ask me before they asked me. So I went on this huge exploration and examination of anything I could get my hands on about self-value, self-worth. And so that's what I did. And as I did that, I could see small but incremental changes within me, and to the point of where I started to heal. And it took some time, and it took a lot of application of processes and modalities, but I learned that anyone can change themselves at any age or stage of life through the power of neuroplasticity. So that's a mouthful, but I decided to really use that information, which it was invaluable to me and life-saving, to write a book, hopefully with the hopes of helping others. The issue is, you have to do the work. I can't do it for you. You can't do it for your interviewees. The person has to do the work to change themselves, ultimately.
You mentioned the term neuroplasticity. Would you tell our audience, what is that all about?
It's my favorite word in the English language, yeah. And the reason for that is that for so many years, we thought our brain was hardwired by the time we were 25. But we learned about 30 years ago through a scientist that did research that our brain actually changes as we absorb and retain new information. And so we were able to dispel the fact that our brain is not hardwired, and learn that as you would perhaps study a new language, if you wanted to learn Mandarin or Italian, you are actually creating new neural pathways in your brain. And the more you practice, the more fluent you become. And then as you know, if you go to a country and all of a sudden you're interacting with that culture, that becomes second nature. You've learned that language. And so you've created new neural pathways in the brain. And neuroplasticity is our brain's capacity to retrain ourselves. And it's fascinating because it dispels the adage, old dogs can't learn new tricks. Now we know anyone can learn as long as they have the passion and the desire and the focus.
Is there a particular way that you learned using neuroplasticity, or can anybody use it in any manner? Say, I just want to learn Mandarin. Not that I would, but...
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. I mean, I applied it to my own self-healing, and I also work with my clients, on helping them understand how powerful the brain is, and that you actually guide your brain. Your brain is automatic to only the degree that you allow it to be. So those habits we learn growing up, for instance, to self-deprecate ourselves, to cut ourselves down, to have self-doubt, to not believe in ourselves, is learned. We grew up with an overly developed external orientation. So we never nurture that part of ourselves. It's the inner love inside of ourselves. And so when I work with clients, for instance, that's the first thing I talk about is you have to believe that you can change. Without that fundamental belief, you're just going to go back to your old habits. But if you have that gem inside of you, I can change because guess what? I learned to play the harp, or I learned to cook a new dish, or I learned to, ride a bicycle, whatever it is. You absolutely accept the knowledge that you can change yourself. And with that as your basis, anyone can change. It just takes a little bit of time and energy and passion.
As the outside observer or expert therapist, whatever it might be, how do you know that the person actually has that within them to change?
That's a wonderful question. We know, I interviewed an organizational management research, Harvard trained. He had been a psychotherapist, and he taught me so much about the brain because he shared fMRI studies with me that showed that when you're learning and you're optimistic and creative, the blood is flowing through your brain, your neurons are firing off. When you're down and depressed and sad, creative centers in your brain close down and you're unable to be as productive, creative, innovative. And every one of us has that capacity. In fact, they've done studies on people who have suffered strokes and have gone through terrible bouts of addiction, and they've injured their brain, that the brain has through neurogenesis, the brain has the power to generate new neurons in the brain. So we all have that capacity. The difference is, are you willing to do the work? And I always say, look, you have two choices in your life. Stay the same and suffer, or choose to change and find a place where you can be comfortable with yourself. Not happy all the time, because that doesn't work. We can't always be optimistic, rosy, Annie, but we can develop that self-value so that we know when we do suffer, we have the capacity through resilience to recover. And that's huge.
When you were on your personal journey on this, when did you realize you had passed the halfway point, that you saw the goal in sight? What was the defining moment for you?
Well, I had many. That's another excellent question. No one's ever asked me that. And I've been interviewed quite a bit. But I would say here's a great example of a defining moment. I would base my worthiness on what people thought of me, their opinion of me. And so I could walk into a room and someone could say, oh, you gave the best talk. And I would light up and think, okay. Or I'd walk into a room and someone would say, oh, I thought your talk was very dull and boring. And I'd plummet, I would just say, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. When I got to the point where I felt I had really moved 180 degrees was when I was criticized by one of my closest lifelong friends. And it just came out of the blue. She I don't know, she was in the East Coast, I was in Atlanta, and she called me and laid into me. And in the past, I would have been horrified, shocked, yelled back, depressed for weeks. But this time, I just said, okay, I know what you're feeling, and I'm sorry that you feel that way. And hopefully we will sort through this at some point. But I didn't take it personally, because I know that when someone is negative towards you, critical, angry, mean, frustrated, it's about them and it's not about you. And so that was a huge epiphany for me and a huge awakening that I had really come far, because I'm the most sensitive, empathetic person. And when I realized that I was connected to who I really was, and I wasn't going to take that as an affront to my character, that's when I knew. And it was a brilliant moment for me. And ever since then, I have felt that way. I mean, I of course, I take things personally that people I love and care about, but it doesn't affect me in that way. It doesn't rattle my self-worth. And that's huge, because it's changed my whole perspective on my life. And
some people might say that's you've developed a tough shell. Is that an accurate description?
No, I don't think. I think people with a tough shell don't allow themselves to be vulnerable, don't allow themselves to feel, don't allow themselves to absorb things in life. And really, most of us, because of how we grew up externally focused, have a wall between ourselves and our lives, which means our relationships aren't as intimate as they can be. Our ability to self-actualize and grow and stretch beyond what's comfortable is not there. So it's just the opposite, I think, of a shell. It's the ability to know that you can be up and down, be vulnerable, be in situations where you're not 100%. I say to people, it is human to make a mistake, but it is superhuman to believe in yourself, even when you make a mistake. And that's when you know that you have meaning and substance about yourself that really will carry you through the most difficult times in life. And I think that's our goal in life, is to get to the point where we find meaning within ourselves, and we don't have to look for it outside of ourselves. We don't have to look for affirmation from other people. We know that we are a good person. We are a trustworthy person. We're honest. And that is really a light bulb, I think, for most people. At least the people I work with feel that way.
When do you reach that point, as you say you have done in your own life? Are there further levels that you can aspire to, or is that it?
Oh, no, we are changing and evolving constantly. I mean, and that's part of the process of neuroplasticity. I've taught my 86-year-old mother how to change her thinking about things. It never stops. And there are issues in life that we are facing right now, for instance, that are out of our control. The COVID situation, which has caused so many deaths, so much illness. My brother's family just got sick, and he hasn't been able to recover yet. And, you're constantly going through these ups and downs, highs and lows in life, where you are going to have periods that you stretch and grow. And in those periods, with that inner strength, you say, okay, I've combated this situation. I'm going to continue to grow. So it's an ever-evolving process. Your energy is always changing and growing. And so it's something that happens lifelong. But I do think one reaches a comfort level within themselves that is very profound. And one of the quotes I use in my book is by Mark Twain. The worst thing is to be not comfortable with yourself. And I talk to people about that. That's really, when one suffers from low self-worth, everything in their life is impacted. Their energy, their attitude, their ability to sleep, their sexuality, their relationships, their productivity, their immune system is negatively impacted by low self-worth. So it is the heartbeat of our lives, and something we really should all want to strive.
As you were doing the research for this book, what did you come across that you did not know that really changed your whole thoughts on how you're going to develop the book?
Oh, that's a brilliant question, because that was, I would say that was one of the biggest mistakes I made in writing the book. Is I didn't really, I was focused on this topic that's so huge, the brain, it's so complex. If I had chosen just one bit of it, such as self-trust, it wouldn't have been as difficult to write. But I think, I mentioned neuroplasticity. That's huge. I also became a student of psychophysiology, which is the connection between the mind and the body, to put it simply. And we are learning, and as I interviewed all these experts throughout the world, we're learning more and more every single day. We're just on the cusp of understanding how powerful our brain is. And if I can teach one person that their brain is at their command, that they're not an automatic robot that have to be a certain way, that is huge, because the minute you're in tune with how your thoughts and your behavior, then you're in the position of being able to change them. But so often we become robotic in our lives. And I think this period of COVID has really, it's brought so many people down. And so many people have suffered depression and suicides and bullying, because they've been accustomed to being busy, the busyness of life, looking outside, going to meetings, going to appointments. And now this time has focused them inwardly for the first time in their lives. And there are no concrete markers that tell people which way to turn anymore, because none of us know what's going to happen. So a lot of people have suffered during this time because they don't have those distractions So what they've been feeling has kind of bubbled up within them and come to the surface, and many don't know how to cope with those issues. Excuse me.
Well, let me go back just a little bit on what you had been saying and rephrase a question, and that is, when somebody picks up your book, what do you want, the one thing that you want them to get out of that is fill in the blank?
The one thing that I would like them to get out of is that they can learn that they are worthy, that their life has meaning, that they matter. And that is something that is hard to believe. Millions of people don't believe that. And so they walk around frustrated, angry, unfulfilled, lonely, which is huge right now, that they can learn to believe in themselves. They can eliminate self-doubt. Some people feel they're going to recycle these critical thoughts for the rest of their lives. No, absolutely not. You can change your thoughts the moment you decide to. Thoughts are just thoughts. They're not concrete. They're not truth, and they're not fact. They're just thoughts that you learned from your caretakers or parents in your youth or through school. And at any moment, you can change those thoughts. That's what I want to impart. And that learning how to value yourself is the most beautiful thing that you can do for yourself, the greatest gift you can give yourself and your loved ones. It changes the whole landscape of your life. I can't emphasize that enough.
Now, what we need to emphasize is, where can our audience get more information? I bet you have a website.
I do, and my website is www.anne, A-N-N-E, middle initial O, Boudreau, BOUDREAU.com. I have an author page on Facebook at Anne Boudreau Author, and then I've got social media, although I haven't developed it the way I ought to be, but I just haven't had time. So you know how that goes, Doug.
So much for Twitter, I guess. Now, let me ask this. How has all of this affected your life? You were on one career path earlier in your life. Not unusual for people to have a second career, a third, or another, even a fourth, as they call them these days, encore careers. Mm-hmm. Well, how has it affected your life, and where do you expect it to take you?
Oh, it's changed the course of my life dramatically. I always felt that I had to be this big executive and have a huge income and constantly be accepted and be valued by the CEOs of my companies and all that. And at the end of the day, it was very lonely. So now I'm on a mission to help people heal and teach them how they can really learn to accept themselves in such a way that they will be able to ride the waves of life, the storms of life. And so I'm speaking to people, I'm working with people, I'm doing some seminars for companies, and I absolutely love every day of my life. Again, I'm human, so there are days I feel better than others, but I always know in my heart that I'm on the right path and that helping others is so meaningful in so many ways. I don't have the monetary income that I had, not even close, but again, you don't do things for the outcome. You do things for the love of what you do, and that's fulfilling. So that I'm so excited. And I moved in this direction later in life. I was in my mid to late 40s. But I've never looked back. Never.
You've been watching the Bizgnus Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@bizgnus.com. Thanks for watching.